Hello there. So, before we go ahead and discuss about the be form of verbs, which we otherwise call them the auxiliary verbs, we are actually going to talk about the sentence structure. This is very crucial when we want to speak or when we want to write an English sentence. There is a basic sentence structure which has to be put into consideration. Now, the basic English sentence structure starts with the subject, then we have a verb, and then we have an object. When this sentence becomes very complex in the future, you're going to find that we have some other parts of the sentence. We'll talk about the complexity of a sentence in the future, but in this level and at this juncture, it is only imperative, it's very important that you only know the basic form of the English sentence, which is, again, a subject, like a noun, or maybe a representative of a noun. A verb, it's a doing word, the word that is showing an action in it, and then an object, which is probably also a noun or a noun phrase. Now, if we're going to move on to our topic, which is the be forms, or rather called the auxiliary verbs in some instances. In some places, it's also known as the helping verbs. Why? Because they're used to help the main verb in the sentences. But what we're going to look at is not that function, but the basic usage of the be form of verbs. Now, the be forms are am, is, and are. Their usage depends on the subject of the sentence, or they also depend on the pronoun of the sentence. So, for example, if the pronoun is the first person I, then I am obligated by the rules of grammar to use am. If the subject is he or she or it, then I am obligated by the rules of grammar to use the be form is. And if the subject is you, we, or they, which are the third person pronouns, then we are obligated to use the be form are. Let's look at some examples. Now, if we're going to use the first person pronoun I, we are supposed to use am, right? So it's going to be I am. We have a question here. What are we going to put here so that we have a full sentence? We need an object. Then, I am a student. So student is an object. Alright? So we're saying I am a student. This is our first example. I am tall. I am in school. These are the examples that we can use with the be form am. If we're going to move on to the second person pronoun, which is, then we are going to be obligated to use the pronoun he, she, and it. Let's have an example here. He is a driver. Very simple sentence. We are always going to start with the basic simple sentences. He is a driver. The driver drives a car, or maybe he drives a bus. So he is a driver. Very, very simple sentence. She is a doctor. She is our subject, and is our be form, and doctor is our object. So in the place of these pronouns, we can actually use actual names. For example, she stands for a lady. Then we're going to say she is a doctor, or maybe Mary is a doctor. So if we don't want to use the word Mary, because we probably know that the person who we're talking about, then we're going to represent Mary with the pronoun she. John is a musician. John is a teacher. So, if we don't want to say, or if we don't want to use the word John, then we use he. And because we've got he, then we are obligated to use the verb is, or the be form is. So we're going to say John is a musician. Now, moving on to the third person pronouns, which we are obligated to use are. Now, we have the third person pronouns we, you, they. We are. This is the plural first person pronoun form. So we say we are students. And if we move on to the third person plural form, it's going to be they are students. They are students. So we have a few people sitting over there, and we know that those people are students. Or if we know the names, then we can use their real names sometimes if you want. So we say Maria and Mary are students. So say they are students instead of Maria and Mary. Now, if we want to use the second person singular and plural form you, then we use are to. So what are we going to say here? We say you are smart if we're talking about one person. If we're talking about many of you, then we're going to say you are smart. So it doesn't change. Whatever changes, it's how you use the sentence. That is what describes whether the sentence is a plural form you or a singular form you. There's no way we can say you is or you am. Alright? Even though sometimes in slang and street language you might hear the usage of the verb you is, but that's not grammatical correct. Now, having talked about the positive forms of these be forms, let's move on and talk about the negative forms. How do we make a negative sentence using the be forms? By just adding a not before the be form. So, for example, if we have am, we're going to add not. I am not a student. I am not tall. I am not a driver. I'm a teacher. Now, if we're going to move on to the second be form, which is, then we can say he is not a student. Or sometimes we can have contractions, especially when we are using these words in speaking, because speakers always want to move quicker. So we're using the short forms of words. So we say he isn't a student. He isn't a student. All right. She isn't tall. She is short. Okay. It isn't a dog. It is a big cat. All right. So this is how you make negative forms of questions. Now, using the be form are, we're going to say, we are not students. We are not drivers. We aren't in school right now. We're in the streets. Okay? So, this is the usage of the er forms. Now, if we move on to the usage of the second pronoun, you, then we're going to say you are not. If we want to shorten them, then we're going to say you aren't. Let's have an example of a sentence. You aren't a student. You aren't smart. Which I really don't believe so. If you are here and listening to me now, then I do believe that you are really smart. You aren't in school right now. Okay, so these are the negations. These are the negative forms of the be forms. Let's have the last example of they, which also uses the be form are. So the negative form is still aren't. So we're going to say they aren't in school right now. They aren't students. They aren't at home. Or they are not drivers. So these are the examples. Now, the ball is now on your court. I would like you, before we proceed on to the next usage of the be forms, I would like you to make your own sentences, both in the positive form and in the negative forms. And I would like you to send them to me for checking. Make as many sentences as you can. Why? Because learning a language is all about practice, and practice makes perfect. See you in the next lesson.